So, what do you guys think about this? Talk to me. I guess I need to give you a microphone, don't I?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's okay. I mean, it's a class, right? I'm glad it's a class, not just a lecture. So what do you guys think?
It looks like a New Yorker cartoon.
Okay, what's the cartoon saying to you?
Shared experience.
Uh-huh. Should I close this? It's a little noisy. Shared experience, yeah?
Fairly empty shared experience.
Mm.
It's a hole in a wall.
Yes.
Two-dimensional characters find out that it's a dimensional dimension.
There are different expressions on people.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like a group aha.
Group aha. I like that.
But it doesn't seem to be necessarily a good aha.
Yeah.
Not like a terrible one either.
Huh. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's near.
Not very.
Not very clear, right? It's foggy. Interesting. Yeah, I came across this, and I felt like when I was doing my PhD work, I felt like this was very illustrative of academia in some way. I think, science in some ways. I mean, I think, academia, we're very good at describing like the shapes of things and how straight the lines should be in an ideal world and what things go where. But we're also we also are after that. We're after that. We're after real life. We're trying to describe it. Now, it's not to say one is better or worse. They're both important. But, let's not confuse the map for the territory, So I show this at a lot of my talks to remind myself about what the point here is. What are we doing here together? So the seminar of Advancing Wellbeing, which is an amazing and ambitious topic. I mean, this really is ambitious. We're all lucky to be here, to participate here today. I think that it's valuable, unlike a lot of fields perhaps, but it's valuable to talk about why we're here and how we got here. How did you end up here? Why did you choose this from all the other things that are available? And I wanted to touch on that for a minute about how I ended up here. I actually started in this world, in classrooms, and studying learning. So I created this technology in Beijing called mouse mischief, which I don't know if you guys know, but I was actually rejected here as a master's student. And the reason, not the reason, I mean, it's like the way I applied was because of the kind of the OLPC stuff that was happening. One laptop per child, and there was amazing push. And I had worked on this project, which, there's OLPC, and then there's like kind of OMPC, one mouse per child, that I was kind of working on. And the idea was, okay, let's have people kind of collaborate together. Like they're looking at the same thing, there's a shared perspective. And that changes the dynamic between your colleagues versus looking into an individualized display. So then I started saying, well, okay, that's learning writ large, but what aspect of learning am I particularly interested in? And what I came to realize is, have you ever looked over someone's shoulder when they're searching Google? Let's say you're with a colleague or a friend, and you're like, yeah, let's go look this thing up. And like one of you is looking it up, and the other one's looking over the shoulder. I don't know if you guys ever do this, but I love doing that because it's like, well, I wouldn't have typed that. Like I would totally do this, and this would be better. And then you're like watching this person, like, what do they do, and how do they do it? So how we search the web became really fascinating to me. and because it's such an incredibly important tool. How you describe queries, because it affects so many things about what you're going to learn, what you're going to get back, and how effective you're going to be. So I was interested in that and how you could do that in a shared context. But then I took a class from this guy, Jay Fogg, which you guys may have heard of.
Spoke here last week.
Oh, last week, okay.
Skype.
By Skype, yeah. So one of the things that I learned from BJ was this goggles that now we're all kind of familiar with this lens of behaviors, looking at designing products that actually change behaviors, and also how he did that, which is also really interesting because he's all about specificity and simplicity. It's like, what's the smallest thing, and go deeper on that. Smallest behavior. So that brought up an important question for me. And by the way, as I go through some of these slides, you'll see like I put an extra long little transition there. And notice how it affects you differently from when I just go, it's very different. But so I kind of asked myself, well, if I need to focus on a behavior, and I'm interested in specificity, tangibility, and measurability, what behavior do I choose? I personally, I mean, people talk about diet, exercise. These things were very important to me. But the fulcrum wasn't the most efficient at those. I was trying to go deeper and deeper as to what was like the underlying root, the root behavior is what I ended up looking for. And I ended up on a lot of self-inquiry there, which included falling in love with a woman. Not the research topic, but a woman, a person. And that experience was actually very informative for my research career. You know, it was like, what did that mean? And really, really connecting with someone and not just on an intellectual level, but kind of, you know, having an emotionally deep experience. And so that opened me up quite a bit. I'm seeing a nod and a smile from a woman. That's great. A woman in the audience. Yeah. But I'm curious, you know, from you guys, how have you, tell me a couple words, tell everybody, like some moments where you felt like, yeah, you know, like I really want to work on this. Like, because there's so much out there. How do you gravitate towards something? Some thoughts, just a couple words. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 years ago I just used the same Google and I was looking for a topic for my Ph.D. And you know what I found?
What?
A combination of two words. The two worlds that were around me all the time. It's a persuasive and technology.
Right. Yeah. Combining two ideas into.
I had like a master in computer science and a master of MBA, but I worked like for more than 10 years in customer relationship management. So it was all about psychology.
Right.
Without the background.
Right.
But it was like an experience, like more than 10 years. And then the more like a educational background of computer science, technology.
Kind of like two worlds that were separate colliding and creating a new possibility for you.
Like
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, anyone else? Doesn't have to be so dramatic. It can be just something like it maybe a hunch. Yeah.
Feels right.
It feels right.
Certainly know up front.
Yeah, it feels right. That's important. It really is important. We were just talking with Patty before the talk about, you know, our physical intelligence. So if you're really into like being smart and you're at MIT and you're like the smart kid and all that, well, what if I told you that 90% of your intelligence, you know, whatever that means, but you know, your body's actually really intelligent, that your gut is really intelligent. And there's a lot of information flowing this way to your brain, not just that way. So if you're really into like, you know, making good use of it, then certainly you'd be curious, at least. If not, take some steps to kind of uncover what's possible there. Any other? Yeah.
Question, aren't all those feelings that you talk about referred to emanating from the body and going to the brain? aren't those feelings really recognized in the brain? Because, and then you ascribe the notion of feelings to them?
Yeah, well, I think when he said it feels right,
Yeah.
he,
Is it feeling like my stomach feels comfortable, or is it my mind feels comfortable with this, and so it feels right?
right, maybe the mind feels comfortable with the sensation in the tummy, perhaps. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but I know that if we're open to the possibility that we're just starting to understand this, because there is so much power in, hey, it feels right, or I feel something here, and being open to like, okay, well, that's okay. What does that mean? Yeah.
I was going to just add on the topic of feeling, but in the Hawaiian language, there are 7 different words for different kinds of chicken skin, which is to communicate your intuition.
Is chicken skin the Hawaiian or phrase for like goosebumps? Okay. Okay. There's 7 words for that.
Chicken skin, yeah.
So in Hawaiian also, when you say aloha, it actually means to share breath with someone. And if you've ever gone to Hawaii and you're from the mainland, they may call you a haole. A haole means someone who's from the mainland, which is here. But a haole really means one without breath. I just got chicken skin saying that.
Shared breath when they greet.
Yeah.
That's what ha'ole means.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, what? Ha
Ha,
is breath.
Ole, none.
None, right. Yeah. So one without breath. Yeah. Yeah. So they literally were seeing these people come over and they were like, wow, like those are howlies. They're not in touch with the rhythm of their breath the way that they were in a way, right? So we're all familiar with these kinds of feelings, ideas. They're now pervading, us. Well, I was, feeling all those emotions, and so I was also having experiences where I was talking to people about, the aha moments, feeling right, in the shower. I was in the shower and this was happening. I was in nature and I had this insight, felt right. Or I was this, and pattern that I was noticing was that people ascribing it to the shower, nature, whatever. But there is a common thread, which is it's our state of mind. And it isn't the shower. I mean, maybe there's an interaction with the shower, but hey, there's something about our own state of mind. And so for me, when I was asking myself what behavior, what thing I wanted to focus on for my dissertation work, this was the one that most kind of did it for me. It was like, what if I could do something that would help create the state of mind, cultivate the state of mind that would help me eat better, help people eat better, exercise better, all the other behaviors that people are interested in, are interested in. So that root behavior became more clear. And for me, it ended up being the breath. Now, why the breath? Well, I had personally just had experience in meditation, yoga, swimming. I had swam a lot growing up. I had experience in musical instruments. The breath was something for me. I was educated a little bit about it. But when I started to delve into the science behind it, that became a whole new world. But in this initial inquiry, it was like, wow, that felt right? To use Tal's phrase, that felt right. And that's an interesting idea, that a technology would not just help us do more things and do things differently, talk to more people or accomplish things, but actually help us be different. And that was like, oh, that might be worth something. That might be like something that we could give it enough structure and enough ideas and enough the right words that people can then talk about it. And once people can talk about it, then it becomes real. And it becomes not just like this like thought I had on a bus going to Laos, but like it's like a real thing, because words are so powerful. So one of the things that actually BJ taught me that is how important words are, and have the courage to to be powerful with your words, to be ambitious with your words. So how do I describe this idea that technologies could help us be different? At the time, I kind of said, well, let's call them calming technologies, because if the technology can help us be calm in our minds, meaning we're not reactive, we're not aversive, we're not grasping, we're kind of clear, and we're able to make decisions better, we're able to, work better, be more creative, whatever our endeavor was. So that's what I meant by calming technology. It could be seen as the tip of this, up here. You're not relaxed in a calming technology, but a quarterback in the pocket has got to be calm, not relaxed. You don't always want to be relaxed, but calm is certainly very powerful. A chess player making a move. So that idea, I started talking about the idea with people, and again, to make ideas real. You guys are the kings and queens of that, but I made this kind of working group on campus and got enrolled enough students and faculty and staff on campus that this was like, hey, yeah, like I'd be down to take my work from medicine, from so many different disciplines to kind of contribute to a general thinking like that. And so again, in the interest of making the idea real and helping designers and researchers think about the products that they're creating differently, we started to create frameworks, to create heuristics. Well, how do you think about the project that you're doing with the lens of the effect that it's having on someone's state of mind, as opposed to the lens of how can it be more usable, which is very important. Usability, efficiency, effectiveness, errors, very, very important. It's gotten us very far. But when everything in your environment is designed to make you efficient and effective, and everything you interact with has that intention latent in it, what is the result? The result is a lot of very hyper-transactional interactions that you have with products. So we started to look at things a different way and to think about them differently. We even created design cards to help people, when they're evaluating an interface, when they're thinking about, okay, well, how would I make this calming? How would I make this have a different effect on people? It's useful to have these kind of prompts that I won't go into detail now, but one of the ways that we came up with these prompts, besides interviews, evaluating other interfaces, ones that worked, ones that didn't, was also reflection, contemplation, with the seed being product design. So I literally do guided meditations in my class that there's part of the meditation is about design. So it's a pretty fun way to meditate, because you're like, you don't have to leave the lab, which is convenient, and it's kind of feels good. So I'll show some examples of different prototypes that students have created in our class and the group. This is an interface. This is actually not in the lab, but it starts at 100 when you start your day, and every time you check your phone, that number goes down. So and by the time at the end of the day and you're at 7, you're like, wow, I have checked my phone 93 times today. And it's just kind of an awareness about how much we're using them. And then you rotate the screen, you kind of see how often you're checking your phone. I was talking about this with Patty earlier. Email is obviously a very prominent part of our day. If you were to design a system that stressed people out, email would be a very good candidate for an ideal system, because it's essentially throughout your day making you feel overwhelmed. No matter what you do, it makes you feel overwhelmed because it's just unending, and there's all these other reasons why. So we were experimenting with feedback to bring awareness to how often you're checking email, how much you're processing compared to other days, how much time, and also batching the emails. I'll show you another example of that. This was a to-do list, which if you've used to-do lists, you know, again, you get this feeling of like, all I do is process information all day and feel overwhelmed. So this was one where you got rewarded for accomplishing tasks. The screen would change to different calming images. There was a social component where it would let other people know. So when you did something, it didn't just check, go away. It was like, oh, someone else completed something. You can make a comment on it, things like that. So just experiments in trying to humanize the work that we do daily. This was an interesting project. We did a collaboration with the Gmail team because they were very cognizant of the issue that email frustrates people. And what they did here was use machine learning to estimate the amount of time and predict the amount of time that an email would take to respond to process, based on your prior activity. And then it would predict that, and so you could do something like, okay, I have 5 minutes. I'm only going to do email for 5 minutes. And so it would just show you emails that fit within 5 minutes. So it's not like, I'm only going to do email for 5 minutes, and then you open it and you're like, you know, oh my God, I don't have enough time. And no matter what you do, you just feel overwhelmed. So you could actually, on a mobile device, you could talk to it and say like, okay, 1 minute, and it would just show you one email. So you wouldn't even see all the other stuff. So again, using technology, but with the, yeah.
Does this exist yet?
You know, right? It should, right? It existed. It's not like a public thing. Yeah. I think it was a Chrome extension that they made for it. Also done experiments with physical environment. So this was an experiment we did in a library at Stanford where we had, you know, calming imagery, which you would expect, you know, is nice. But we had two different conditions. One is a normal kind of calming image. Another is high fractal depth, super high resolution, same image, just different resolution. And the theory was that, you know, when you're in nature, no matter where you focus your eyes, you can kind of look more, and you have a different focal depth. You can fluctuate your focal depth, and that is part of what's calming, as opposed to just everything being on a flat plane throughout your day. And it turns out that the effect was replicated. The resolution of the image affected how calming that it was. Yeah, T.
Two quick questions. Do you think that would apply also to 4K, 5K, 8K displays? And do you think there's also the opposite effect with maybe non-natural images like text? Maybe sometimes the text being too sharp is more annoying than calming?
Huh, interesting. That's a good question. I don't know on either of those questions, but I don't know if it would be, it's not just the resolution of the screen, it's the resolution of the image also within the screen, which I assume you implied that. But yeah, I think it up to a point, it probably would matter, because, you know, when you're looking out, you know, under some trees, it's like you can just focus on one thing and keep seeing. You can just keep seeing, and there's just more details. So replicating that, I think, as the theory goes, would help. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a similar type of question. If you had a very high resolution picture of like Times Square, a very not calming place, do you think there would still be the calming effect more so than, say, this picture in a very low resolution, because you can look in such depth at the Times Square?
So if you were comparing a high-res Times Square to a low-res nature image, you're saying there's a two kind of. I think that could be actually more calming, because there's like, it's not just this image, you know, it's a place that you can kind of visually interact with, and I think that's what kind of takes you out from the single plane and lets you engage in something else and then come back, and it gives you those micro rest moments. Apple Watch is going to come out, which talked about this, but we had done some experiments where, you know, you touch someone's face on your phone and you would feel their heartbeat through the mobile phone, through the vibration, and it's actually really powerful. I didn't expect it to be as powerful as it was. I don't know how subject to the novelty effects it is, but you know, when we did some tests, it was like just with different people, very powerful. This is also with email. So the idea here was taking the very robotic feeling of processing information in email, just like, okay, next, did this, and giving some ambient awareness to it. So the way this worked is that you had reply, delete, and forward as different actions, and they would show up as petals on these different flowers. And when they became full, they would just kind of like fly over here, and you'd get a sense of what you did. So turning the tangible, intangible, virtual actions into semi-tangible. Oh, look at all the stuff I did. I did a lot of work, and also adding some emotion to it, to those actions that you're taking ambiently. So it doesn't interrupt you, but it's there. As well as more intervention-based. So this was a mindful eating intervention, which prompts you about, hey, how are you, like, how was that meal? Not just good, bad, whatever, but like, what were you eating? Do you actually taste it? Do you know what the texture is? Maybe what the ingredients are? Like, are you realizing what you're doing? So more of a mindful eating intervention. This is a project that I had a lot of fun with, where we installed real grass on people's desks at work. So this is like sod. I mean, it's like a mess, and it has worms in it and like stuff like that. Stuff you do not expect to see in like this, everything white and square and everything. And people loved it. It was so, because there's so many senses that get triggered there. I mean, from the tactile, these little prickly, the grass, and there's so much information there to the smell. And even what we found is that people loved just tossing their phones onto the grass. And I had this wonderful feeling for them because it was just like, yeah, I just can throw it there. And it was like this organically would land somewhere. And it was a really positive experience for users. So incorporating organic, very organic, so not just simulated organic, but actual like organic material and organisms into sterile environments, yeah.
Did you compare that sort of as a control to a soft surface that's made, that's produced, that maybe has some texture to it, not necessarily emulating grass? So they could toss their phones, so when they put their hand down, they get slightly different sensations wherever they touch, and comparing it. And so is it the nature, or is it the softness and the texture?
Yeah.
Variation?
Yeah, we didn't. My hypothesis would be to simulate what that does is actually, it's very complex because there's so much going on there. There's the prickliness, there's the size, there's just like, and everything is different, so it'd be tricky. But I imagine it's potentially, you'd be able to.
I'm not thinking of going all the way and trying to get every aspect
Right.
of that, but saying maybe there are some key features that do the majority of that effect.
Yeah.
Produce the majority.
Yeah, it's possible. I will say that having a living matter, living being, you could say, with you is a nice feeling because we are living creatures, and so I don't think that will ever go away. Yeah.
For all these tests, how long were you studying with the subjects, and how long did you observe? Short. These are generally short, not looking at them past novelty effect, if that's what you're kind of asking. Yeah, I think that's kind of like the next level of design is to how to sustain an effect or modify it so that it is sustained. Yeah. Different research problem than we were working on. So I'm curious what people are working on that might have calming elements. Those of you working on projects, perhaps class projects or research projects. Maybe, yeah.
UI elements that would allow us to more subconsciously cause people to lower their breathing rates.
Interesting, yeah. Got it. UI elements on the screen that would subconsciously influence people to lower their breathing rates. Yeah.
This is a different direction altogether, but there's like a small company that's out of the Prudential Center downtown in Boston that is a bit more aggressive. They have basically electrical stimulators that send pulses into the brain specifically for relaxation.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some of these. Oh, it's pretty cool. Have you tried it?
I did try it. It was an early prototype, and the press has been positive. So other people like it. I had like muscle twitches all over my eyes. It was early.
Right. Right. I heard about it. What's it called? Is it a name?
Neurotech is one. Think is the one that's.
Think. Yeah, right. Think. That's with the Y, right? I just heard about that. Okay. So what do you guys think about that? Let's take that example. So putting something on, I mean, the future is now, you know, putting something on to stimulate relaxation as compared to what Tal was just talking about, which is this subliminal thing that influences you to slow yourself. What do you guys, how are those different? I mean, besides the obvious, if you were using them perhaps. What is the calm created the same? Yeah.
So my issue with Think and neurotech, I mean, I've also tried it. What I don't like about it is that it makes me feel like I'm still very alone in the world. I still need to take care of myself. And this idea that you can interact with people and to design for them in a way that makes them feel more comforted, less stress-free, and so forth. I think that that's like powerful to have those conversations. And so like the idea of like putting that to my head is like taking like Valium or like a pill. I don't know.
Yeah, Tal.
If we generate something that feels more like a prosthetic, then it also contributes to removing the sense of control to an external source, and then would actually backfire. Probably.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess the question there is, let's say it does work, but then let's say you're using it over time, and then what happens if several months of handing over the keys to this thing? Interesting.
Address what the source of the not calm is, and to provide somebody a means to evaluate that instead of reading it in this way. That sometimes that there's just some simple change that they can make in their life, like falling in love. Well, that's not simple, but like something like that will cause somebody to be very calm all of a sudden and know how to technology can bring that.
Yeah. Patty, you saying something?
I was going to say a student in our group who graduated, so she's no longer here, Sophia Bruckner, she built a technology to convey warmth from one person to another. She had both a sort of stationary thing where you could hold it and feel someone else's warmth, or she also had actually a pendant where you could feel someone else when they touched it.
Oh, yeah.
You could feel it as
Right.
well, or someone else could feel it. So I think it's interesting to think about other ways in which people can communicate that are not sort of the Facebook posing
Right.
texts that you carefully craft and
Right.
pictures that you carefully craft. But more sort of more genuine, more honest types of communicating maybe or relating to someone else.
Yeah, you know what that brings up for me is, so with the Think technology, or let's call them the stimulating relaxation or something, and I would say even some relaxation techniques, the goal is to relax, and okay, but it's like a purely physiological process. But if we ask ourselves, well, what is innately relaxing, and I don't want to use relaxing necessarily because I think it's not always the case that you want to be relaxed. We want to live our lives with calm. So what are things? Is it like social connection, like meaning, emotional connection, some kind of interdependence on people? It's actually like it's innately, and it's a different kind of, it may not always be physiologically calming to feel those, but there is a, maybe cognitively it's calming because the doubt is gone, or the anxiety about the situation is gone. So the question there, I'll leave that with, is what are things that are innately calming? And that's substantial enough to really do inquiry on it. And also what's exciting about that to me is that it means, there's obviously so much can be calming, right? I mean, to humans, I mean, there's some fundamentals, but it can vary by person and so on. And that means that there's going to be an entire ecosystem of this, of these kinds of things. You know, it's not going to be like, well, calming down just means like taking a few deep breaths and like that's it. No, because they're going to be integrated into our day, because we're not always going to be just relaxing. And yeah.
You mentioned that there is a difference between calm and relaxed.
Right.
So if you imagine those polarized. So if you imagine there is like this polarization of the words, so probably when we think about relaxed, then the opposite word is probably stressed.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be at the other end of the dimension where at the one end is calm? So what would you pick?
I would pick anxious. Because you can be anxious and be sitting here in the room. And you can be anxious like, you know, the quarterback in the pocket anxious.
And where would you put worried?
Worried.
On which on those dimensions or?
Well, I mean, you're talking about a space. I mean, I think you can be worried. I would put it more towards anxious. This is just totally anecdotal, but more towards anxious, and you can. It depends on where what kind of worry is it? Is it the worry that at home that's like this very bludgeon of worry, where you're just like you're not breathing at all, and you're just worried about it, you know, or is it that kind of hyperventilatory worry?
Yeah, why I'm asking this is because when we had the initial class and we had to come up with what kind of behavior change we are going to tackle in the course, and my example was about that people tend to worry about things that are not present. Mm-hmm. So about their past or about the future. Both of them, they are not present today. And so people are worried about non-existent things.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that what we've seen, if you're at all following like mindfulness literature and where it's going and the whole kind of international conversation about that, it's clear there's a lot of value in, you know, coming out of the future, coming out of the past, and all that. But it suffers, my opinion is that it suffers from the same issue that telling somebody to not stress suffers from. Because, well, we have to think about the future. We have to think, we like thinking about the past too. Like it's describing something really well. But at least the way it's been translated, and at least the way that it's commonly spoke about, the reason I think it doesn't have the effect that it can have is because we all know that we're thinking about the past and the future. It's part of our day, and it's totally okay. So how does this play into it exactly? And I think that there are different ways to think about the future and the past. And I think what the purpose of that communication initially was kind of getting lost in the future. But that's very different than thinking about the future. You know, if they're two different things. I'm thinking about the future, this, okay, that is what I'm going to do. What if this happens? And that's totally okay, because our hyper-rational MIT minds really want to do that, and that's okay. You know, that whole conversation I think can be more effective. You know, yeah. Did you have?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add or ask, does it have to be a technology, or can it be a habit of mind?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
like focusing on gratitude. I was asking, does it have to be a technology, or can it be a habit?
right.
Like focus on gratitude. And if you take a moment to make a list every morning of 10 things to be grateful for in the last 24 hours, I think it
Totally.
calms.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
very calming.
Yeah,
At least to
absolutely
me.
it is. And it doesn't have to be, right? But then again, we all know that there's a whole bunch of people, some of them are in this room, that like creating technologies, you know, and that's okay. And technology is a oh, actually, I wanted to say something about that, which is that you know, being literate used to be this incredible. I mean, it's still very powerful, but it's like, imagine when books just started coming out, you know, and you were literate. I mean, it was just a superpower. Now imagine if you could write, and you could write books, and you could communicate. I mean, talk about a superpower. It's unfathomable to really internalize how different that makes us. Well, we're technology creators. Okay, when's the last time that like you read a book? I mean, right? So really, the people that are creating technologies have this superpower that is a big responsibility, actually.
I agree.
It's a huge responsibility, and so if it's a big responsibility, what's the implication of that? Okay, I have a big responsibility. Well, it means that if you want your voice to have an intended effect on people, it better be coming from an authentic place. And it better be something that you yourself have, you know you're coming from a clear place, right? So what that means is wherever you're coming from is going to be in your creations, right? And that's a motivation for like, hey, we are the book writers of the 21st century, and everyone's consuming what we put out there. Well, like, what are we going to write, and who are we going to be when we are writing these books? So, but anyway, we know that we have, and it's not just us, right? Obviously, there's a lot of people doing it, but so yeah, I teach this class, Decompress, at the D School. The theme that I've been thinking about, I've been on leave for a little while, getting Spire off the ground, but obvious solutions from non-obvious insights. So one of the things that I push students to do is do these things called NOIs, non-obvious insights. And everything when we come back and talk about what we learned from users or through different forums, it's like, what's the NOI? What's the NOI? And it really pushes you to think past the like, well, here's what I found. I found this, and it's just a quantified number, which is important. But give me a quantified number about, give me a number about an NOI. But then also, and this is what I think I'm excited about for this quarter, is then create an obvious solution, because then you get that whole thing of like, oh, that was obvious in hindsight, which is like a great place to be in. You want to be creating those kind of things, you know. Because then it touches people, you know. So that's something that we're going to try to work on. And okay, I'd like to take a minute or a couple minutes. If you're sleeping, wake up. If you're at a computer, just maybe close it if you're comfortable with that. And just sit comfortably. Just get your back straight. Get some oxygen into your brain, because it probably wants that. Yeah. And just put your writing instruments down and hands relaxed on your lap in some way, and feet flat on the floor if you can, and just relax the tension from your shoulders and your forehead. Start there. And you know, hold your head straight. Like, don't kind of like slump because you think you're in relaxed mode, so you're going to slump back or slump forward. It's not. You can do that maybe later, but let's try something where it's like you're just kind of like straight. Your spine is straight, and you're kind of reteaching your body through muscle memory what it feels like to sit straight, because that's a, you know, you want to be intelligent, not just in your brain but in your body, right? And what I want you to do is just witness your breath. Don't try to change it. Just witness it. Be a witness of it. It's this process that's happening. And whenever your attention, you know, goes off, just kind of bring it back to the breath, and every time you exhale, Find that part of your muscles, your body that's clenched up, and just like let it go. And it'll happen again, and that's totally cool. And you're witnessing your breath. And what I want you to witness is this microcosm of homeostasis that's happening every several seconds. And notice, you may be able to notice the difference between the inhale and the exhale. And it will take your mind being judgment-free of the door opening, of movements, those things are all perfect. Your mind, you're a witness right now. You're a witness to the microcosm. And these two components, these sympathetic and parasympathetic components to your respiratory cycle. So every time you inhale, and what's happening is your heart rate is actually increasing. Your heart gets a little faster. And you exhale, and it slows down. You can actually feel that. Maybe not here, maybe not right now, but it's one thing to intellectually understand it, but it's another thing to experientially understand it. It will stay with you longer. So there's benefit in, as I was mentioning, doing that work on ourselves. It's not really work, it's our own bodies, but it's life happening. So the sympathetic, or that fight or flight that's being activated when we inhale, it's gating the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve. It connects to all these different types of organs. It's ungated on the exhale. So every time you exhale, this nerve becomes ungated. So why don't you try something? Again, you're not trying to breathe any certain way. You're just a witness. But on your next exhale, try and kind of compress your throat a little bit or your mouth a little bit to try and lengthen that exhale and feel what that's like. And you can experiment with it a couple different ways, because now we're really engineers. We're scientists observing data, and we're manipulating a variable to see what the effect is. And when we see those images on the wall of the nervous system and the veins going through the body and the muscles and all it's kind of like we can actually like feel things. We can feel them physically. And notice that just by doing that very tangible thing, you're playing with the gas and the brakes of your nervous system, your body, your brain. You're modulating things. And now imagine that, obviously you're not taking these kind of breaths, and there's nothing particularly good about that breath. We're just scientists. This is objective data collection. So what often happens is in our day, our breath, the muscles in our abdomen are clenched up, and so the breath doesn't actually get down into the bottom of the lungs. The problem with that is that gravity, the power of pull of gravity means that there's more blood down lower in the lungs. There's more places for the oxygen in the air to feed the blood. So it's actually useful to have times where those muscles are not clenched and that air can go lower oxygenate more blood. It sounds good. I mean, that sounds like a useful thing. And what happens, and they don't actually know this, it's my hypothesis. One of the things that happens is that we breathe that kind of shallow breath, hour after hour. We end up with sighing. What is a sigh? You know, emotionally we know what a sigh is. It's like this kind of like, you know, it's this there's meaning to it. You know, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, okay, I got to do this now, or oh, that was a lot to do, or like these kind of things. Well, it's also it's a breath. It's a form of breath that your body is forcing you to take. So it will take a couple more seconds. You don't have much time in this state, so use it. Relax your abdominal muscles. Not with stress, but just with effort. Just not even with effort, with letting go of effort, right? Okay, when you're ready, just open your eyes. Cool. So I remember when I first did meditation courses and things like that, I was taught that the Buddha was a scientist because he was very much steeped in observation, by direct observation. And so that's how I see it, you know. One of the reasons I was trying to summarize why respiration is powerful beyond physiologically, and actually I meant to talk about this while we were doing that, but the timing of when your body decides to do an inhale versus when your body decides to stop the inhale or do the exhale, or all those different components, is not arbitrary. Obviously it's not arbitrary, but it's also not only physiological. There is a neurological component to it, or a mind component, let's just say, because we don't know enough about how it all works. And it's actually really fun. It's fun and amazing to actually figure out, well, when does my body decide to do an inhale when I'm just sitting there and not doing anything? When does that? What is that relationship? Because it's so available to observe, and yet we don't know. So respiration reflects the mind different from how the mind sees itself. So that's useful because it's outside of the mind. Because when the mind is viewing itself, it's like, oh, I feel stressed, and I feel this, and I feel that. It's like it's the self-referential thing, which has its place. But the breath reflects the mind in a different way. And so it's just another data point, and it's an objective data point. And it does so in an accessible and embodied way, which again, very useful. Because I'll tell you, one of my personal just beliefs is, I went to grad school. I did a Ph.D. I was at a competitive place where people are just like doing this whole thing. And, when you're in your head and you're thinking, there's so much thinking going on, that same machine that can produce some good things, it can also turn on you. It does turn on you, right? I mean, it's just like, we know that. And so the embodied piece is not one to throw away. We talked about it earlier. It feels right. I mean, there's something there. There's something there. And if we're going to be legitimately open-minded scientists about it, we can explore that. So that's what I love about the breath, is that you don't need a sensor to feel it. Even though I want there to be a sensor involved because I'm a technologist, the fact that there's no sensor involved, that makes it really great because it's easy to feel and understand and to use. So I'm actually going to skip this. But if you guys know Bruce McEwen's work, I think he's in New York, right? Allostatic load, it's like this really cool framework for thinking about stress. But I'm going to skip some of those things. So when I was doing my PhD, I had this whole thing about breath, felt right. I came back and started looking through the literature. And I've read like thousands of papers about breath. And it's like they've been doing lab studies about breathing rhythms and patterns for many years, but they've never taken those insights and taken them out. And my hypothesis is that it's because there was no sensor available that was truly continuous wearing, and you could do simple, and it wasn't just this thing you had to wear around your whole abdomen, but it was just trivial. So we built one. You guys have fancy ones here, I'm sure, and you've built many of them. We built one, and we put it on people during just normal daily use. So here is reading a book, and here's reading stuff online. I'll go back again. It's both same duration. Here's reading a book. Here's reading stuff online. It's not like coding. It's just reading stuff, just same material. One of the things I love about this is you can look at the data and actually understand something. You can feel something about it because it's the breath, and because you kind of know what it feels like to breathe slow and fast, and it's something that's very tangible. You can look at the data and it's meaningful beyond just the intellectual level. It's like, oh, that's what it feels like, huh? I can like know what that's like. Here's some relaxation. So I'll go back. This was working at a computer, just reading on a computer. I mean, interactive reading, so web reading on the web. And here's relaxing. Here's meditating. I mean, it's really different. So if you ask yourself, what would be the difference in my state of mind between breathing like that, and even breathing like this? This is relaxed. So it's just something there, right? Just to put them side by side, both are 2 minutes. So it's just working at a computer. This is meditation. Those are obviously very different, but so, okay, now I wanted to create products. I wanted to make something that people would actually use and influence them in their daily life. So one of the big issues that I was seeing around biofeedback is that it was stuck in this world of, well, you go and you sit down and you do this exercise that trains you, it teaches you to regulate yourself. And it certainly was useful clinically. It showed all these great effects. I mean, if you know how to administer biofeedback training, it's a whole great thing. But it was like you had to stop what you're doing and go and do this exercise. And that just makes it, in terms of availability and utility, it just changes the story. And so the research question was, can we have similar effects? Can we help people self-regulate without forcing them to stop what they're doing? Because if you're telling me, hey, I know how to a way to make you like reduce your stress. The only thing is like every hour you need to stop what you're doing and go do 5 minutes of this other thing, and like increase your HRV. It's like, great, all my intellect believes you. I'm still not going to do it. So it's, people are people, and we need to design for them, not for the ideal rational one. So that's not ideal. So we did a study where we showed some feedback on the system tray of their desktop about what their breathing was like while they were doing some cognitive tasks. And we found that, actually people can self-regulate, slow their breathing down, without hindering their performance on the task. There was no significant degradation to the performance. I actually think that there's a possibility to improve performance, but I haven't explored it fully. And I think it's a more complex research question. But at least for this kind of task, there's enough attentional resources being devoted to self-regulation that there's minimal amount, really, that you can continue working and do your thing and perform just as well on cognitive tasks. Yeah?
What's breath tray? What's 0 to 7?
Oh, that was the feedback, showing the feedback or not.
In what way
sorry. It was just showing feedback at the top of the screen on the Mac, just showing with a color and a number how far off they were from their baseline breath rate. That's all we did. We like if it was below their baseline, it would show blue color and it would show the number. If it was they were breathing faster, it would show a red number, and it's just very simple. And they weren't processing the numbers per se. I don't think we didn't test that, but it was a peripheral kind of thing. Yeah.
Maybe about to get to this, but do we know yet sort of what the difference is to be appreciable in terms of actually changing one's mental state in terms of breath per minute? For example, if I go from having a baseline breath rate of 21 breaths per minute and you get me down to 19, is that enough of an impact to actually move the needle, or do I need to drop down 16, 15?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't tackle that with this. There are studies that show the optimal breathing rhythms for increasing your HRV most significantly. For example, if you breathe at like 5.5 breaths per minute with a certain inhalation-exhalation ratio, it's like it's been demonstrated, like that's like if you want to just increase HRV. But the difference between 21 and 19, as it reflects what it says about your state of mind difference, I don't know yet. We need to do more studies with EEG and fMRI, really, and we're starting some of those, but I'm kind of in the company now, and so it's like, gotta collaborate with people. So yeah, but really interesting question, and so we took that work, and the first thing we did was like, let's make a really cool band that you would put around you, and let's make it really neat and beautiful and all that to make a real product out of it. But then we realized, you know what? We can make the coolest band in the world. Like no one's gonna wear this thing, and so we figured out a way to do it in a more wearable form factor, and this is Spire. So it's this kind of stone-looking object, and it's meant to look like a stone. And the way it works is you clip it to waistband or bra, here, can be here, you find the best fit. And then what it's doing is it's looking at the expansion and contraction of your abdominal cavity, your thoracic cavity as you inhale and exhale. So first question that often comes up is, well, if I'm breathing shallow, is this going to pick it up? And the answer is generally yes, because even during shallow breathing, you're still getting some movement there. You don't realize it, but it's happening. And the goal of the product is not to necessarily differentiate between those two. So anyway, we created that, and I wanted to show, well, yeah.
You can be moving.
Oh, okay, yeah. So a little bit more on how it works. So if I start moving and I start walking, of course it has accelerometers in it, and it's seeing that I'm walking, and it's also able to see this expansion and contraction through the force sensor, and then do noise cancellation using the accelerometer data to do noise cancellation. Say, well, what is coming from this, and what is coming from this? That kind of accelerometer signal. However, it's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect, and that I think is why we did this. We were able to do it first, is because the people that were doing it before us, they wanted to make sure it was perfect. And we kind of said, well, that's not really the point. It's not supposed to be that right now. So during irregular movements, like if I do that and I inhale at the same time, it's just gonna be like, I don't know what that was. And it's gonna look for the next clean breath signal, and then it's gonna be like, that was a breath. And then it will process information about what that breath looked like until it can see the next breath. And then it will like kind of infer around those clean breaths detected. What's cool about that is when you're still, or when you're sitting, or when you're like not doing those irregular things, like it's a real time kind of like, you're getting very intricate level data, differentiating between the deep breaths, and so I wanted to show this. I don't know, how are we doing on time? It's 15 minutes. Okay. Let me. I think this is kind of interesting to show. So okay, so I left Stanford, put it on hold, and was like, okay, like let's do this whole new. It's like harder than a PhD. Like let's actually make this thing real, and it's been a very difficult, very like emotionally taxing, of course, as you can imagine. And then we like put it out there, and we one of our users made this.
There's one thing we can be sure of, it's that 2015 will be the year of the wearable. Activity trackers made a pretty big splash last year and set the pace for the future of fitness tracking.
They work at a firm.
Fitness is just one part of our daily schedule.
But we liked it so much, I was like, this is better than our video. We should use this.
From the Fitbits of the world that became popular last year. Instead of just tracking steps and making some broad assumptions about your activity, Spire senses your breathing and can tell you whether you're calm, tense, focused, or even active. The device itself looks like a small gray stone that can be clipped to your belt or bra, really anywhere your clothing can apply pressure to your torso. Now, it's rigid enough to deal with the wear and tear of daily life, but comfortable enough to be worn all day, and even at night without too much distraction. Inside the Spire are several sensors that work together to detect breathing patterns that then get analyzed and reported back to an iPhone app. Now, these sensors definitely work best while you're sitting down, but if you're wearing the Spire while you're standing, and even better moving, Spire will override respiratory tracking and work a little bit more like a typical step tracker. One of the coolest things under the hood is Spire's inductive battery charging capability and the beautifully designed charging pad that comes with it. Rather than plugging Spire into your computer at the end of the day, just remove the stone and set it on top of the charging pad. It's easy and really pretty. Now, when we first started testing Spire at the end of last year, the iOS application wasn't even available in the iTunes store. You actually had to download it from Spire's website. Now that's changed, and the first version of the iOS-only application launched in the store on January 2nd. The iPhone app connects to the Spire wearable over Bluetooth Low End, and like other fitness trackers, the app itself is ground zero for all real-time data that you track during the day. You can set up goals related to states of calm, focus, and active, and check your progress by looking at a pretty easy-to-understand pinwheel icon where all your daily metrics are aggregated. Just like breathing, the app really becomes more of a background process than something you feel required to check throughout your day. Where it's most useful is in the notifications. If Spire senses you've been tense for more than a couple of minutes, the app will send you an alert with the goal of actually calming you down. At the end of the day, you can see an hour-by-hour view of your progress and hopefully draw some connections between the data you're seeing and how you're feeling. Spire is one of the first of its kind to report respiratory rate to Apple Health, which in all likelihood it isn't really that important to most wearers. Instead, Spire provides a simple solution that makes you think more about your state of mind, while giving you a set of tools to improve it if you really want to. One major frustration we have with Spire is that it sometimes struggles to detect your breathing. This seems to be related to the kind of clothing you're wearing, or if you happen to adjust positions regularly while you're sitting. Now luckily, the Spire app will send you an alert if it hasn't sensed your breath after a moment or two, so that you don't lose any of the valuable tracking information you're hoping to gain by wearing it. For its part, Spire is challenging the conventional wisdom of what it means to be healthy and what someone's health data looks like when it's tracked. Now, there are a lot of opportunities for a device like Spire, including everything from sleep integrations to acute medical care for patients with something like a respiratory ailment. For now, Spire does a great job showing us that being healthful isn't all about activity, but also about our state of mind.
One of the things that he didn't show is that there's guidance in there as well. So you can do these, you can do basically breathing exercises for different things. So let me just go through this real quick. I was talking about this earlier, but these, because one of the major things here is like, it's great to show some studies in the lab and the results and everything, and it's like, how do you make people who, how do you make them understand the value of it and how it can be relevant to their everyday life? And so it's been difficult, but we kind of created this, instead of like one progress meter of 10,000 steps, it's like, well, let's make it a little bit more holistic to, your activity, body, calm, kind of like your spirit or your heart, and then focus time, which is like your mind. It's like a healthy way to work, which is like sustained breathing rate over time while you're working. So that was the way we ended up doing that. And these are like the boost part, which we're starting to build out more. I think he showed the wireless charging aspect, which is that. And actually, in my bag, I guess it's down in the effective computing room. I brought the box that if people want to look at it, you can. Oh, yeah. So we want to collaborate. We are going to have an API, I think, next month. Our API ready. We have an API. It's just kind of cleaning it up. Raw access to raw data. You know what I mean? Like we come from research, so we're just like, yes, like let's do this together. So you'll have whatever data you want, and it's pretty rich. It's pretty exciting. Like here's someone working at their desk for 6 minutes, and something kind of stresses them out for like 50 seconds. They start breathing rapidly. They take a deep breath, and then it kind of gets back to their normal baseline. And there's new data actually that Spire enables, because it's not, the respiration data is not RSA based, meaning it's not based on reading HRV and then making inferences about what's happening with your breath. It's actually looking at respiratory effort. And what that means is that you're able to get inhalation time and exhalation time. And as I mentioned to you, we did that during that exercise. The inhale and the exhale components are very different and meaningful, and the ratio between the two is something that hasn't actually been studied in the real world. So there's a lot to be done there, frankly, and we're excited to collaborate with people on that. So thanks for the time. I appreciate. I know it was you humored me with taking the time to kind of do a meditation. And I'd love to talk a little bit. I'm here for another couple hours and happy to hear about what you guys are doing and give whatever feedback I can. Thanks very much.
So we have some time for questions and a microphone. Maybe I'll start with one. I know that you've also looked at some ways in which we can try to influence people's breathing. And I wonder whether you can tell people a little bit about that, sort of so apps or interventions or whatever that try to sort of encourage people to breathe slower, deeper.
Yeah. So we did a couple studies. I mean, one literally pacing. So I think there's different classes of ways to influence the way people are breathing. I mean, one is pacing. So that can be reminding people about either their own baseline, which I think can be powerful. It's like, oh, that's my baseline, right? Not just an optimal one. Have potential different effects. But there's a pacing thing that we did. So on your desktop, we actually created this thing where when your breathing started to become more shallow or anything, this kind of bar would show up on the bottom third of your screen. It would just go like, hey, this is how, and it was a semi-transparent bar. It's like, this is how you normally breathe, just FYI. You can ignore it, but it's like, oh, that's how I normally breathe. Oh, okay, didn't realize that. And then you could adorn that bar with information. And so we've experimented with that. We've also done, as I mentioned, more subliminal and peripheral cues that wouldn't necessarily pace you, but can kind of trigger you to change it. And it's not saying exactly how you should change it, but it's like the trigger. I think that's a different class. And of course, things are very different when you are explicitly, like they're engaged in a kind of calming exercise. And we've done some experimentation there as well, including auditory versus visual. And they're very different because when you are, this is actually important. So for research, if you're thinking about like ideas that haven't been explored, if you're visually pacing somebody, they're using their visual information, their visual cortex and all that attention to try to like follow your breath. And the problem with that is that then the new breath rate, the new breath that you're creating from them it's coming from following something, and it's not like coming from this kind of more natural, it's like arriving at something. And I think that actually, if it's a problem, it's actually a problem. And auditory works better often because they can kind of like hear it, and it's had a different effect that we've seen among people. So there are a number of very interesting variables that one can play with. I think that there might be some combination where there's like maybe a trigger, and then there's a pace for like a little part, and then there's like a trigger, and it's kind of like bringing people back to a baseline or a calm breath in a way that feels like they have kind of driven themselves there, and they've taken themselves there, and not like, oh, I'm just following this thing, and it's like trying to breathe at a certain rate is very different from an emergent rate or like even a triggered rate. So unfortunately, actually the great thing is that there's an opportunity here because it hasn't been really done well yet. But unfortunately, I don't have the best way because we're still kind of like figuring it out. Yeah, I mean, haptics, vibrations, it's all available right now. Yeah, just.
Yes, I'm curious. If someone is tense, say they could determine it by thinking about, am I tense now? And you want to try to help them calm down because that's probably better for them. But if someone is not, does breathing irregularly, shallow, faster, mean that they're tense always? And do we know from medical evidence that varied breathing rates might be beneficial for the body as long as they're not indicative of high tension? I don't know that they're better, right. But there ought to be some medical evidence suggesting that calming the breathing rate is desirable from a medical point of view, assuming that there isn't high tension there. I mean, because the tension reduction, I would tend to think, is probably been proven.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and to be honest, the studies don't exist because the sensors haven't existed really. It's amazing. I mean, you're absolutely right that it's not the case that it's always beneficial to just whatever you're doing, just slow your breathing down. Like no, the body reacts to its environment and it needs to be able to. So I think in our app sometimes we may over influence people sometimes, and it's not necessary. There's room to be studied there. Yeah.
We have a couple more.
Next question.
I have a question. When you took us through the guided meditation, that was very helpful, and I saw my breath slow down as I became it felt like the breath was more like the outcome than was, the input of what was creating the calmness. And so I wonder, with like Spire, when you help people to slow down their breath, is that more like trying to invert that, where once you slow down your breath, you become more relaxed? And I mean, going back to the question of what are the root causes of what's creating us to become more anxious, how do we continue to delve into that? Is that something that's like a different work than Spire?
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. So first of all, the tricky part is that this breath has a bidirectional relationship with your mind. So you can't just change one without affecting the other, and then you change the other and it's affecting this one. So it's unlike normal systems that we're used to. So that's not a problem. That's just the nature of the system. It's certainly possible, as I was saying, to be breathing slow, but like in this kind of contrived way, or that's not actually kind of coming from a calm place. And so what does that really mean? And to be honest with you, we haven't solved it. It's like we're kind of like standing on some rickety thing that we're trying to make solid and figure out some of these questions to try and do our best. When you attend to the breath, when you first brought, one thing I try with the app is I'll just put the Spire on someone, and then it's okay, now look, here's your breath going up and down, and it's just kind of it immediately changes. not without them trying, but just the attention to it changes the way the breath goes. And that's really great, but it's also a problem because you don't know, well, like what's causing what here, and what should I be doing? And so I wrestle with it daily. It's like, what do we want to show people that all the time? When is it useful to show that? When is it more useful to kind of say, hey, this is what's happening. You kind of are on your own, and we'll let you know something else later. There's really, we've kind of done the part of like, okay, now we got the tool. Let's now figure out all the stuff to make it optimal, But yeah, really great question.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I want to ask about one of the remarks that you've made. So you said that there's the one aspect of anxiety is and relaxation is like the physical one, and the other one is related to the mind, right? And you said something about doubts and like fear of the unknown or something like that, or fears that drive anxiety, right? And I was wondering if there are some of the technologies that you explored are actually trying to target that. For example, let's say if I look at the email example, right? So let's say if one of my let's say my anxiety is driven from a fear of, I don't know, being lonely, right? So maybe you should pop up more emails that will make me feel differently or something like that. So I was wondering if you
absolutely
targeting fears as a way to relieve anxiety.
Yeah, I think that this is really important. And generally speaking, most of the projects in our lab are actually more like that. They're trying to get at, well, what are the anxieties or the fears or the worries, and kind of address those. We really see the breath as useful as a medium that things can be built on top of. I mean, what happens when your computing environment knows how you are, and the feedback that it can give can change how you are. I mean, so there's I totally agree. I mean, I think that is actually the ecosystem, more so than all the physio data. I mean, we all know like QS isn't it. QS is like, okay, it's like a layer. It's like a data layer. But like really what's it is, I mean, it is this ecosystem of interventions or, yeah, so I agree.
So last question.
Hi, I'm Neema.
Aloha.
Aloha. Putting together what we learned today with last week, where BJ was here, and he said, one good thing to do is to focus on giving people who are already aware of how they need to change, simple behaviors that they can do and kind of take them along to next steps. What I was thinking about for you in this product is that there's 20 million in the U.S. yoga practitioners who are already aware of the breath and how it connects and how you can get mind-body benefits from the breath. Would it be a good thing, perhaps to conduct focus groups with yoga practitioners? I myself, would like to have that post-yoga feeling for longer than an hour or two, for example.
Yeah.
And you might get some ideas for creating software products that could help maintain that focus by exploring that as your first customer group.
Yeah, I mean, so we've now shipped out thousands of Spires actually, and we a lot of those people are people who have experience with yoga. I think that there's a lot of them that kind of wish they made time for yoga, but didn't. Like they're kind of bought into like, yeah, I know there's benefit. I've tried it, or I trust it, I believe it, and yet, either don't make time, want the effect to last longer, want to have that balance that they feel in yoga. I think those are a lot of our users, and actually we did an analysis of our user base so far, and we thought it was going to be the QS crowd. We thought it was a quantified self crowd. We thought it was going to be like the 20 to 30-year-old, 35-year-old, like, geek hacker guy interested in data, but it's totally not. It's actually 35 to 55, men and women, about 40% women, and there are people that I think are exactly what you're talking about. There are people that care about their health. They try these things. They know there's value, and they want solutions. It's not just about the data. So for us in these places, like, it's important to get outside the walls and to experience ourselves, and but yeah, it's a really good point.
So we're out of time,
Yeah.
and it's snowing again outside.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Neema.
you, Patty.